Sentinel operative. Welcome to Firewall, friend. For those new to our private network, Firewall is an organization dedicated to protecting transhumanity from threats, both internal and external, to our continued existence as a species. The fall may have reminded us that our ability to survive and prosper is not guaranteed, but our kind has a remarkably short attention span. Despite our achievement in functional near immortality, we continue to face numerous dangers that may contribute to our extinction. Some of these risks come from our own factionalism and divisiveness, combined with universally available technology that could cause widespread destruction and untold deaths in the wrong hands. Some stem from our short-sightedness, failing to see the dangers in which we place ourselves and our environments through careless actions. Some arise from our own creations turned against us, as the Titans proved. Other risks may come from alien intelligences, whose motivations we cannot yet fathom, and of whom we may not even be aware. Still, others may threaten us by sheer chance and the mindless but deadly cause and effect of a universe in which we are but an insignificant speck. Firewall exists to identify, analyze, and counter these risks. We are all volunteers. We are all placing our own lives at risk in order to ensure the survival of transhumanity. Firewall has existed under other names and guises since before the fall. Numerous agencies with a similar agenda banded together in the wake of those cataclysmic events to assess our situation and prepare for the worst. Now we operate under a single umbrella. We are a private network for two reasons. First, our existence and operational abilities are protected by our secrecy. The less our opponent knows about us, the more effectively we can counter them. Similarly, certain authorities might be hostile to an organization such as ours operating in their claimed territory. Though some may be aware of our existence, we bypass numerous legal and jurisdictional hurdles that might otherwise hamper our actions and goals. Second, our mission sometimes brings to light information that is not only dangerous in the wrong hands, but might even trigger widespread panic if made public. In some cases, the very existence of such knowledge could be problematic. By retaining secrecy and operating on a need-to-know basis, we automatically counter certain risks. Firewall is a decentralized, peer-to-peer network. We have minimal hierarchy and we answer to no one but ourselves. Our node structure enables us to share resources and talents without sacrificing the privacy and security of our operatives. You have been recruited because of your knowledge, assets, or skills, and/or because you have come in contact with a certain restricted data. You have proven your willingness to support our goals, our lives, and existence, and the future of transhumanity may rest in your hands. So here's to the future. May we all live to see it.
I want you to sit down and grab yourself a fucking drink. You can forget the AI-generated message intro crap you just read. Now here's the real deal. You're probably dying to know what you've been trapped into. Maybe you've been told the party line already. That we're all that stands between transhumanity and extinction. Or maybe someone whispered to you that we're a rogue operation that meddles in heavy shit that we have no authority to get involved in. And that we sometimes get people killed as a result. And you must be curious. Maybe you've got a vigilante streak? And you're looking to spill blood for a good cause? Would it matter to you if the cause was a polluted one? Maybe you're a conspiracy wingnut, and you're dying to know what secrets our firewall is clutching to its collective chest? What if those secrets shattered the carefully constructed lies that we all tell to ourselves to keep our sanity intact? Everything you've heard, good or bad, about Firewall, very well, maybe true. We're not angels. We lost the sheen on our ideals when the Titans forcibly uploaded their first human mind. Right now, you should be asking yourself, what the fuck did you just sign up for? Because I did. And the truth is, Firewall is lots of things. Most of it is good, but a lot of it is so fucking horrible. You'll be thinking about planting a bullet in your stack and resorting to an earlier backup, so you can just forget it all. If you have any romantic visions about being a hero, You can just drop that now. You won't feel like a hero when you airlock some kid because he's carrying an infectious nanovirus. You won't feel brave when you run across some altered thing and crap your pants, and you won't even feel human anymore when you make a call that will cost dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of people's lives, even if you are saving millions more. So why would anyone be crazy enough to be part of this thing? Because it needs to be done. Our survival depends on it. To some people it's altruism, defending transhumanity, but really it's about saving your own fucking neck too. Sure, you could abstain from taking responsibility and let some self-described authority take care of it. But if the anarchists have anything right, it's that people in power cannot be trusted. As often as not, they're part of the problem. So Firewall does things the collective way. We're underground, and we have an open source operation. We share information and resources towards our common goal. We organize in networked ad hoc cells, smart mob style. We don't let anyone accrue too much power or control. Everyone involved in an operation has an equal say. We police ourselves. We come from all sorts of backgrounds and factions, so we face a common enemy. We have to win. There is no alternative. Maybe you've heard of the Fermi paradox? That question as to why. If a galaxy so huge, there were so few signs of other life. Even though we've met the factors and seen evidence of other aliens, our galactic neighborhood should be crawling with intelligence, but it's not. I'll tell you why. The universe is not fucking fair. If transhumanity were wiped out, the galaxy wouldn't even notice. Just look at the Earth. The planet still exists, supports life, even though we're far gone. Reality is an uncaring asshole. Forget all that utopian crap about living forever. We'll be lucky to survive another year. We've developed technologies that put weapons of mass destruction in the hands of everyone, but we're still an adolescent species that has trouble overcoming petty tribal bullshit. If you're really looking forward to exploring the universe as a post-mortal, you're going to have to work hard at it. Survival isn't a right. It's a privilege. When you sign up with Firewall, you put yourself on call anytime some shit goes down in your neck of the woods, or that you might be particularly helpful in dealing with. You'll get a call. You'll be expected to drop whatever you're doing and put everything else on hold, as if your life depended on it. It probably does. When you're in the field, on an op, going to the doctor, as we call it, your cell is empowered to act as it sees fit. Just keep in mind that you'll be answering to the rest of us later. You'll also have the Firewall network to back you up, though resources are often limited, so don't expect us to always save your ass. Other sentinels can be called to pull strings, but every time we do so, it threatens to unveil an agent, create a trail that we need to clean up, and otherwise complicates matters. Self-reliance is key. One last thing, don't ever forget that we have enemies. I'm not just talking about the nutjob who wants to nuke a habitat to make a political statement, or the neolithics who think bio-war plagues will teach us all a lesson. I'm talking about the agencies that know Firewall exists and consider it a threat. If they tag you as a sentinel, your days are numbered, and you're back up too. So put your freaking back. So that's the real deal. As soon as I give it, welcome to our secret house, comrade. And remember, death is just another day on the job.
Transhumanity. Once a prosperous species that showed great potential, now brought low by their own hubris. They have faced near extinction, and what do they do in response? Exactly what they always do. They distract themselves. The poor retreat into artificial realities or narcotic nanomachines, while the rich concern themselves with the domination of their enemies. Both forget that their environments are small, cramped bubbles in the vacuum of space. That the only planet they can survive on without special augmentation is a radioactive hell, populated by destructive nanoswarms that raze continents. In short, most of transhumanity keeps their head buried in the sand. Sure, there are some organizations that are trying to safeguard transhumanity, but those agencies are either corrupt, paranoid, or bound to governments more concerned about the next election cycle than existential risks. These careless outlooks are what led to the fall in the first place. They also led to the creation of Firewall. Firewall serves as the primary vehicle for an Eclipse phase campaign, so it only makes sense that the second episode of this series focuses on who the PCs are and what they do. So let's get some backstory. Let's rewind the clock. It's the 20th century. Atomic weapons had just been used for the first time in war, and just 5 years later, Enrico Fermi and his colleagues laid the groundwork for the modern understanding of existential risks, known from this point forward as X-risks. Their torch would be passed down to future generations of scientists, who would find themselves struggling against the current of mass ignorance. You see, pre-fall Earth was quite typical for a cyberpunk dystopia. Corrupt politicians, megacorporations with all the wealth, masses of anthropomorphic cogs who spent their free time being outraged at whatever social media told them to that week. With the ocean of idiots drowning out rational voices and scientists being strong-armed by short-sighted CEOs and politicians. Knowledge that could save humanity was locked behind patents or otherwise ignored due to lack of economic incentive. The scientific community was getting fed up with a society that remained willfully ignorant to their warnings about X-risks. Enter Jason, the scientific advisory group for the US government. They would be the first entity to cut their corporate and government ties. In doing so, they would become the Argonauts, one of the founders of Firewall, and to this day, one of the most respected authorities in scientific matters. The formation of the Argonauts was a rallying cry to be broadcasted throughout the scientific community. Many scientists from across the world would join the Argonauts in secret to provide otherwise private information and influence corporations and think tanks towards their collective agenda. Said agenda was to elevate the voices of science and reason and to maintain an open policy standard for scientific findings. Many groups colluded with the Argonauts. Perhaps the most notable was Blue Mars, a science and X-risk analysis group on Mars that were the first to discover Titans had a foothold on the planet. As a testament to how incompetent transhumans can be, Dr. An Liang and her team within Blue Mars would see themselves silenced, and their backups impounded for leaking information that local governments and corporations deemed too sensitive. This was a pivotal moment that saw the rest of Blue Mars turn militant and take a more active role when the Fall officially entered its hot war phase. Black Mars, as this new offshoot was called, would have very few surviving members, but those who did would serve as an example for other predecessors of Firewall to follow. Many of these groups would come together and pool their resources at the height of the Fall. During this time, what would become Proto-Firewall was no longer just scientists trying to warn people about X-risks, but also combat veterans, medics, cybersecurity experts, and influencers. There were many other groups that would form the basis of Firewall, but we don't have time to discuss them in detail. All these groups had something in common though. They were all fighting against existential dread. Be it through whistleblowers, hackers, or armed combatants, each one attempted to push against the Fall. and aside from some marginal successes, they all failed. They were all too small, too disorganized, and too unaware of each other and what they could bring to the table. This, however, would soon change. Proto-Firewall had been busy during the fall. If they weren't rescuing refugees, they were conducting dangerous field research and making use of the data. Attempts were made to reach out to governments and corporations during this time as well. And although a few got their feet in the back doors of these organizations, success was still very limited. At the same time though, many experts were being poached by these same organizations, and Proto-Firewall would have to scramble to recruit as many as they could in the style of Operation Paperclip as the fall wound down. Within months of the mysterious ceasefire that would later be understood as the end of the fall, a new political landscape was being established. Paper corporations found themselves to be in charge of massive populations. Colonies from different, now extinct governments had to band together to form new bodies. The X-Risk community was no exception. The Argonauts, who had set up shop in the Outer Rim prior to the fall, hosted the first X-Mode 1 conference in Simul space for the X-Risk community to congregate and establish a next step. Predictably, very little was accomplished during this conference. However, two key developments occurred. Firstly, a secure and private social network would have to be built to facilitate communication. This would be called the Eye, Firewall's own network within the deep mesh, complete with its own wiki and reputation system. The second was an agreement that resources would be pooled in order to combat future X-risks. Almost immediately after the Eye's formation, clashes would occur on its forums. Some wanted resources directed towards countering X-risks head-on, while others argued they should be funneled into escape and survival plans. To this day, the debate rages on. Another argument was over the inclusion of Infolife as members of the organization. After all, AIs are responsible for the fall, at least that's how many survivors see it. Thankfully for the AGI members of Firewall today, rationality overcame post-fall paranoia. Unfortunately, it took the destruction of a ship loaded with 120,000 egos for the organization to realize its own xenophobia. This would be known as the Sweet Dreams Affair, named after the ship destroyed by a cell of Proto-Firewall operatives, all because the pilot was an AGI. The Sweet Dreams incident would become the first major split that would solidify the political factions within the movement. The pragmatists, the conservatives, and the backups. Many members left the Eye over similar debates to form their own organizations, such as the Reclaimers. This wasn't much of a problem though, since there were millions of refugees who lost everything, including their bodies, and wanted revenge. Not just against the Titans though, but the incompetent powers that allowed the Titans to exist in the first place. All these people needed was a cause. In the year 1 AF, the X-Mode 2 conference was hosted by the Argonauts. This would be the last time the Argonauts would host the X-Mode conference. Between the discovery of the gates and the resulting Titanian schism, the continued existence of the Titan threat, as well as the discovery of a rival organization dubbed Project Ozma, it was clear something needed to be done. Maddie Brainbridge of the Jormungandr Initiative was the one to call for unification of what was at this point still an unnamed network of peers with a common goal. This motion was carried out with an overwhelming majority, and in the next few days, a constitution was written. Firewall had officially been established, and the rest is history. So, what does it take to be in Firewall? Let's start with the big picture. Whenever Firewall needs to establish a presence in a region, they set up what they call a server, which is a collection of between 6 and 50 proxies with a set project or objective to accomplish, or meant as a permanent stronghold or lookout post. Sometimes multiple servers can operate in the same region, or perhaps multiple regions at the same time. For example, the Martian server is a permanent fixture meant to keep track of multiple projects at once, such as monitoring activity in the TQZ and the gatecrashing ops of Ma'adim Vallis. Meanwhile, a different server dedicated to studying exsurgent strains may set up a temporary lab to collect and analyze samples in the TQZ, and forecast the findings to their base of operations somewhere in the main belt. Servers always operate on group consensus, though the specifics vary from server to server. For example, one server could operate on a system of direct democracy, while another elects leaders who will be held responsible by the entire server. Some servers also have a specific cultural identity that seems to stick no matter how many times Firewall rotates its members, while others seem to have no identity at all. Some servers try to set up a strict hierarchy or code of law, and power struggles are an occupational hazard. While some servers work together on intersecting projects, they mostly stick to themselves. Firewall nearly always works on a need-to-know basis. Still, proxies are expected to at least give a generalized report on their server's situation. Within each server, there are two kinds of agents: sentinels and proxies. Both of them will be covered in detail, but for now, we'll just cover them briefly. Sentinels are the grunts and field agents that form the majority of the movement. They're expendable assets who are often given only the information they need to complete the missions proxies give them. Sentinels also have lives outside of Firewall, and only need to answer the call on occasion. Proxies, meanwhile, are full-time agents that dedicate themselves to Firewall. Proxies can be considered the closest thing Firewall has to a central leadership. They have much greater access to information, and they are responsible for ensuring each server is functional. The power structure of Firewall ensures that no matter how many heads are cut off, the body won't die. That said, having so many heads means not all of them are going to agree. Sometimes factions can form, sometimes a server will go rogue, and sometimes, due to the opaque and secret nature of the organization, friendly fire incidents can occur. As a good example of just how poor communication is in Firewall, they don't even know how many members they have, only that it's somewhere in the thousands. Firewall is constantly getting infiltrated by any number of third parties as well, and it's not uncommon that agents get audited for corruption. Despite all this though, Firewall still pushes forward. This is because the Eye's own reputation economy helps determine which agents are trustworthy. And the decentralized nature means infiltration, corruption, factionalism, and power struggles are easily isolated. When the shit hits the fan, Firewall has proven itself capable of putting aside any grievances to neutralize numerous X-risks. The strangest paradox of Firewall is that its greatest weakness is also its greatest strength. The internal tension is what keeps everyone focused on the main objective. Skepticism and faith go hand in hand to ensure trust is always maintained. Now we'll zoom in a bit and talk about the transhumans that keep the operation running. Sentinels are essentially player characters, and they are typically organized into small fire teams between 4 and 8 members, known as cells. A cell being your party. Sentinels are on-call operatives who are required to answer the call of duty somewhere between a weekly and monthly basis on average. Aside from that, Sentinels are free to pursue whatever careers and hobbies they wish. Cells are put together on demand by specialized proxies known as routers, who handpick the Sentinels for the required mission and disband them afterwards. However, it is not uncommon for certain cells to remain together long after their mission, especially when the sentinels work well together. Sentinels are considered expendable assets, and they know it. Trust in Firewall is a brutally honest, yet opaque relationship between proxy and sentinel. All sentinels understand that they work on a need-to-know basis, and that information can and will be withheld from them. However, sentinels also understand that they will always be given any information crucial to their survival and mission success, as well as whatever support the server can provide both during and after a mission. So, what does it take to be a sentinel? Well, it's not as cut and dry as having skill, talent, and determination, although those are sought-after qualities. And yet, a surprising amount of recruits are found in the field. After all, someone relatively competent who shows courage fighting Titan mechs and bioweapons may be worth recruiting on the spot. These cases are often exceptions, though, as they require a degree of trust in the judgment of sentinels in the field. When Firewall actively searches for new talent, though, it's usually carried out by a proxy. Methods of prospecting can range from asking fellow agents on the eye if they know a guy, to mesh searches of people with notable accomplishments. Ultimately, what Firewall looks for first is talent and skill. Each proxy has their own method of drawing in and evaluating potential recruits. They use some combination of social engineering, stalking, and psychosurgical evaluation to get the job done. These methods can range from subtly nudging the subject into being interested and willing to undergo an evaluation, to straight up fork-napping the ego and interrogating it. Either way, the objective is the same. Find what motivates a subject and try to appeal to that motive in the sales pitch. If the subject declines, then something has to be done to ensure they don't leave with information about Firewall. This can range from simple memory editing to causing a hull breach that launches the subject into deep space. As you can imagine, the former is a much more preferable alternative. As mentioned, part of the recruitment process is about discovering the subject's motivations. Not everyone is willing to lose everything for the safety of transhumanity, after all, especially when the ones guaranteeing that safety are an opaque and disjointed shadow organization. So many sentinels have their own selfish interests that Firewall is happy to accommodate, be it wealth, protection from the law, access to juicy secrets, or just a plain hatred for the Titans. So long as their interests are aligned, Firewall doesn't care. Likewise, Firewall isn't too strict on Sentinel's ideology, so long as it doesn't conflict with their MO and they respect the decentralized nature of the movement. As a result, a Sentinel will have to cooperate with people from all walks of life. Uplifts, AGIs, hyper-elites, socialists, fascists, communists, anarchists, extropians, argonauts, mad scientists, terrorists, criminals, lost generation kids, socialites, bioconservatives, techno-progressives. The list goes on and on. Firewall needs diversity of opinion to ensure decisions aren't made in an echo chamber. If you spend enough time as a Sentinel, if you prove your skills, dedication, and loyalty, and if you're okay with surrendering your mental privacy to Firewall, you may end up with a promotion from Sentinel to Proxy. For the Sentinels, Firewall is a side gig. Volunteer work with some added perks. But for many proxies, Firewall is what pays their bills, sometimes literally. The proxies form the foundation of Firewall, and a new one is added every so often, though the promotion process can be a little complicated. To be a proxy is to be considered an invaluable asset to the movement. It means more trust and freedom, but also more responsibility. It also means you are skilled in multiple fields Firewall deems crucial. Firewall separates proxies into a number of roles so that coordination and identification of specialists is more streamlined. Of course, proxies aren't pigeonholed into these roles. In fact, regular role rotation is considered ideal for OPSEC. These roles are as follows. The first proxy role was the Crow. This is due to Firewall's origin as altruistic scientists before the fall. In fact, many Crows are researchers and professors who just moonlight as proxies, especially Argonauts. This also means that key data from private and government research agencies will occasionally leak into Firewall. Math, quantum physics, machine learning, robotics, psychosurgery, medicine, bioengineering, xenobiology, xenoarchaeology, and anything related to the Titans and Exurgents. These are just some of the areas of expertise for which Crows are called upon. When Crows aren't busy providing their consultation for that thing you scraped off a wall in the TQZ, they're busy with R&D. Firewall may even set up black labs for them. This means any homebrewed gadget given to Sentinels for field testing could be the handiwork of a Crow. They may even be able to provide certain off-the-books modifications for Sentinels in the field, then provide similarly discreet medical services when those Sentinels return from an op with bullet wounds and laser burns. If Crows are the brains of Firewall, then scanners are the eyes and ears. The job of scanners are, in my opinion, the safest yet most boring job a proxy can do. The job requires scanners to collect bulk information from the mesh through limited AIs and search algorithms, then meticulously sift through that information and sort it by reliability and threat level. From there, the results are posted in specific sections of the eye, often restricted from the average Sentinel, or passed to other specialized proxies like Crows for deeper analysis. Any urgent information is usually issued with a request to open an operation, to which proxies on the server vote over. As you can imagine, a lot of missions are initiated by scanners. Considering the magnitude of information scanners have to sort through, most had to fork themselves to their limits, sleeve into infomorphs, and work 30-hour shifts just to stay on top of their work. Even then, they're still understaffed. Understandably, this is why scanners only focus on information relevant to Firewall's objectives. This is why scanners are typically embedded into news agencies, security firms, political parties, rep networks, and hedge funds, among other professions. Likewise, the best scanners usually have a wealth of knowledge in fields like those stated above, as well as steganography and cryptography. AGIs make some of the best scanners, as most of them were developed for this kind of work. Scanners are often the targets of honeypots, mimetic warfare, and false flags by rival groups and organizations. While not stated in the books, I'd like to imagine scanners require a deep understanding of meme culture to succeed at their job. I'd also like to imagine that too much time in their role, combined with the psychological toll of forking, will eventually turn scanners into tinfoil tier schizos.
Before we knew it, by giving over our consciousness to this system by our daily decisions that it was able to manipulate and control into a larger system. There's now a human counterstrike taking place to shut this off before it gets fully into place and to block these systems and to try to have an actual debate about where humanity goes and cut off the pedophiles and psychic vampires that are control of this AI system before humanity's destroyed.
If data compiled by the scanners is sufficient enough to warrant a new operation, it's up to the routers to deal with it. Routers are responsible for the coordination of resources and assets necessary to take on X risks. This can be as simple as sending information to the right people, hence the name. Other times, however, they are responsible for putting together a plan of action and a cell of sentinels to execute said plan. In other words, they are the quest givers / GMs who have to personally deal with PC shenanigans, so please treat your router with respect. After all, they don't get any glory like sentinels. Yet when an op goes sideways, they're at least partly responsible and have to fill out paperwork on the misadventures of the cell in question. They're the ones who have to explain why the sabotage of a Hav's whole power grid was necessary to complete the mission. So again, please consider your router, especially if they're lenient enough to allow you to carry out a mission the way you see fit. Routers usually manage multiple cells at a time. Even when they're not, they're busy with other executive functions, like coordinating other proxies, training new recruits, debriefing, and more. Routers are usually the only ones who take the initiative in Firewall, and are perhaps the only people more overworked and understaffed than scanners. When a router puts a cell together, they usually have to equip them with the right tools for the job. This often means acquiring gear that isn't exactly easy to come by, such as an unregistered machine pistol equipped with a suppressor and 100 rounds of ammunition loaded with a neurotoxic payload. In such cases, how does a router acquire this gear? The same way they acquire funds needed to keep the lights on in Firewall black labs and fabrication sites. Registers. Registers serve as the quartermasters of a server and are responsible for supplying everything from morphs to money. Due to the nature of their work, they're hardly noticed unless the server is short on supplies. Registers come in two flavors. The Sunward registers tend to be stockbrokers, bankers, entrepreneurs, and accountants, as to reflect the credit economy. Rimward registers are typically extroverts, micro-celebrities, and fixers of some variety in order to get rich in the reputation economy. Both have to deal in rep, credit, and favors though, and oftentimes interweave their work with other side gigs and business ventures. For example, if you need to have a registered weapon disposed of after a mission, they'll likely know a guy on the black market and flip it for a profit. When a register isn't buying, selling, or laundering, they're usually managing supply caches and safe houses for a rainy day. Ultimately, given their position, registers have to be shrewd and calculating. Firewall doesn't take kindly to rich kids using the server budget to gamble on the stock exchange. So, the server gets news from the scanners, which is then passed to the crows for verification, and the routers for planning. The router organizes a cell and calls on the registers to provide mission gear. And if Lady Luck wills it, the results of the mission aren't messy. But what if they are messy? Maybe the team doesn't make it back alive, or perhaps they left a loose end or even evidence at the scene of the crime. If an eraser squad needs to be called in, it's because somewhere down the line, someone fucked up. Usually the sentinels. Many sentinels actually fancy themselves erasers, or perhaps look up to them as examples of the badass they want to be as a secret agent. The truth is often disappointing though, and not everyone with a background in military or security is cut out for the role. With rare exceptions, erasers aren't all there in the head. Maybe it's because of combat addiction PTSD, or maybe they just have ASPD, or maybe they're just die-hard ultimates or members of the lost generation. Especially in the latter case, perhaps they were serial killers? Firewall has a don't ask, don't tell policy when it comes to erasers. Either way, erasers typically don't lead normal lives. In one server, they may be kept under close surveillance. In another, they may be locked into 24/7 combat sims. In another, they may just keep the egos of the erasers in cold storage, only sleeving them into a morph when needed. Either way, it's all the same. Erasers stared too deep into the abyss, and now most of their peers see them as monsters. Rarely do they ever regain their lost humanity. The methods eraser squads use can vary greatly. Some might lure their targets into a killing zone, others will use discretion and infiltration, and some just take the direct approach, with a pair of pumped up kicks, a fully loaded shredder, and a belt of thermobaric grenades. These ones usually don't see urban deployment. Some may even work solo rather than in squads. These are by far the scariest erasers. Either way though, they're all murder hobos who do whatever it takes to obliterate their mark, be it an ego or a whole facility. Pray you don't see one approach you without a heads up, because if no one told you that an eraser was going to be working alongside you, it's because they aren't. Erasers are scary because they will test your backup insurance and maybe give you PTSD. Filters are way scarier though, because they will make you wish you were dead. Filters and erasers actually have similar jobs, and that they help clean up when someone in firewall fucks up. Usually the sentinels. The key difference is that filters are the exact opposite when it comes to their approach and personality. While erasers have the charisma of a Titan war machine, filters are socialites and artists with a background in psychology, impersonation, journalism, and marketing. In other words, they're social engineers, and in a world where death is just an inconvenience, reputation is eternal. So don't get on their bad side, unless you're okay with waking up to feds at your door and your spouse emailing you with a divorce petition. Thankfully though, empathy comes with the territory, and they are aware of their powers and how to wield them with tact and finesse. Filters are deployed before, during, and after a mission for various utilities. They may organize a big social event to distract the majority of the HAB, with a fireworks display big enough to mask any gunshots. When the news of a murdered CEO makes headlines the next day, they'll deploy a meme to knock it off the trending results for long enough to forge evidence that throws off the wider public. Filters do more than support ongoing missions though. Through their influence, they can accumulate reps similar to a register, and even aid a register in stock manipulation. They also work with sentinels to plant and remove evidence, making the narratives they spin more consistent. And vectors can uncover secret pressure points they can use as blackmail. Speaking of vectors, they are last but absolutely not least in this lineup. Vectors are the people who keep the eye running and mostly free of infiltration attempts. On the surface, vectors are simply the eye's sysops and watchdogs. In reality, that would just be a waste of their skills. Which is why they can also perform a number of roles involving communication, infosec, data manipulation. They can even perform psychosurgery. To sum it up more simply, vectors are Firewall's elite hackers. If a router wants to put new recruits through a VR training course, someone has to program that course. If the registers need weapon IDs removed, or a fabric to be jailbroken, vectors have them covered. Do sentinels need a new secure communication channel? Vectors will set one up. They may even provide hacking support directly to sentinels in the field, though this is rarely done for the same reason you'd rarely use a sledgehammer to crack walnuts. When they are needed on the attack though, they usually do so in coordinated groups in order to maximize success rates. Considering the crucial nature of their job and the sensitive information they get exposed to, vectors are simultaneously kept happy and on a short leash. They are expected to operate with more transparency than usual, while also being heavily sanctioned off into their own squads to prevent leaks. That about covers it for the internal structure of Firewall. So, what's it like to be a member? At first, it sounds pretty cool to be a secret agent who gets to handle restricted weapons and save the solar system. It brings out a sort of childlike sense of adventure in everyone. But remember my opening statement, the majority of transhumanity would rather bury their heads in the sand, and with good reason. Soon enough, every sentinel will begin to realize the gravity of their situation. You will have to cancel going to your mother's birthday party last minute, lie to her face about why, disappear for days, then come back to find a concerned look on her face. Then, when she asks if you're okay, you have to lie again, and pretend like you didn't witness a cellmate rapidly turn into an eldritch horror before your eyes. No one will see the things you see. No one will bear the responsibility and guilt you will. If you're lucky, you can maintain relationships with loved ones, but you will always feel the crushing alienation. There's a reason why some want their memories edited, and some even ask if they can submit an official resignation on top of that memory wipe. Others will start to view Firewall as their only true family. After all, who else can empathize with the things you go through? Who else can understand the hopeless and nihilistic truth you've been exposed to? And that's just from the existential threats, like the Factors, Titans, and Pandora Gates. Agents who are compromised could face their egos being put on ice for a number of years, and that's the best case scenario. Worst case, some hypercorp authority might put you through a psychosurgical interrogation and torture every drop of knowledge out of you, then heavily edit your egos so that you turn into a brainwashed mole. Or worse, they sell your ego to ex-humans who have their own private hell waiting for you. If you manage to get through the initial shock of it all though, you'll find that being a sentinel isn't as bad as you think. Like I said, there are people in Firewall who understand the pain and know the importance of keeping everyone in one piece. They'll help in any way they can, like helping you make an alibi so your mom doesn't get worried about you. Likewise, most favors asked of you will be fairly mundane, like giving someone a place to crash, delivering a cube of platinum to a dead drop, or being someone's date at a social event. Eventually though, you will be called upon for an actual mission, and if you're lucky, your router might start you off with something easy. Missions can range from espionage to scorched earth tactics. Some missions can be as simple and boring as surveillance of a hypercorp research building. Other times, a team may be sent to a ship or habitat that's gone completely dark, equipped with military-grade hardware, and an expectation of the worst-case scenario. Heists, assassinations, sting operations, undercover work, blackmail, smuggling, sabotage, purging. All are things Sentinels may need to do. These missions may not even directly relate to the countering of X-risks. After all, Firewall isn't completely self-sufficient. Sometimes you'll have to take out a rival gang's pedal lab for the night cartel in exchange for them smuggling you in that plasma rifle. Maybe an AGI escaped their corporate masters and Firewall is being offered a healthy amount of credits to ego nap and hand them back over. All this isn't to say that Firewall is amoral, but rather morality is a luxury that the movement can't always afford. After all, the Titans may be gone, but their machines and plagues and viruses are still here, left to their own devices. Their masters are still out there somewhere, and that alone is enough reason for transhumans to be kept up at night. But that is a topic for another day.
Well, it's finally done. First off, I'm sorry for the amount of time it took to finish this. I could blame any number of factors, but there is no excuse for a broken promise. It's been a weight on my shoulder for 2 years now, and I'm just glad it's finally over with. I knew I had to get this out there, though. At a certain point, I realized I was becoming yandere dev. I want to make something clear, though. Consider this development cycle as a point of reference for how long future episodes will take. I also won't give any promises about an estimated release date from this point forward either. So just pop in every 6 months to a year to see if a new video's come out. My next episode is going to be on the Titans themselves, as well as an overview of the fall. After that, the plan is to do an episode on the Exurgent virus, then an episode focusing on Psi and Asyncs. Anyways, I've gone on long enough, so thank you for watching and see you whenever episode 3 comes out. Bye!